Howdy-o, what do you know? It is Rabbit back again, doing some nice, nifty, happy-go-lucky, starting out which class is basically the best for a new player bullshit. So we're back again. That was a very interesting intro. I didn't have a plan for that, I just kinda kept going with it. But, well, we're back, And so I think what we'll do is, I went very basic with the first video I did, and I did it for a reason, and as I mentioned in that video, it sort of came from a template that Strimtom himself had done, and he's one of the most prolific Dido streamers out there, so I figure I'll follow in his footsteps and do a little bit of extra animation for this one, and try to be a little more, a little more in-depth about what we're talking about here. So, last time I mentioned that the Paladin, right? The Paladin, the Barbarian, and the Warlock, and the Ranger, those four are the best of the multiple classes. I think there's 15 out now. The best of the classes that we have. So, what we're going to want to do today is we're just going to go through what makes them the best. And, oh, now that I think about it, I think I might actually do some of the other classes too, and detail what makes them good, but not necessarily the best for a beginner player. So I think what we'll do today is we're going to start off with a Barbarian, and we're just going to go over, we're going to create this thing, and I'll sort of showcase how I would create a Barbarian to serve, the purpose or the needs of a new player. It's not necessarily how I create all Barbarians. The great thing about Barbarian creation, or any class creation really, is that you can create these things the way you want. So, without further ado, let's get right into the path. Alright, so paths. Basically what we have here are 4 different selections. We have 3 sort of named things: Savage of the Wild, Storm of Kargon, Bastion of the Outlands, and then we have Customize, which allows us to make whatever we want with the material or the resources that we have allotted to us. So I'm not going to bother with any of these. These are basic outline builds. They've kind of got little flavor text here that help you understand what they're all about. But we're going to go with Customize. I always recommend Customize, and that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to detail exactly what you want to see out of your Barbarian, so you kind of know what you're looking for. And we have a huge list of races to choose from. Now I'm going to make everything simple. Every single one of these builds is going to use human, the one that you have access to all the way through. This is from the very beginning. You can make a human of any class that you have access to. Alrighty, and here we are. Now, I have 32 points available. You'll probably have 28 points available as a sort of starting out new character class. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to build the 32-point version, but I'm going to show you how to build the 28-point version, which in pretty much all of these classes is going to be almost exactly the same, and I'm just going to put points where I can afterward. So, Barbarians. What do you want from here? Well, Barbarians are very easy. Strength, just put that all the way up to 16. Good starting strength, a very strong one. Humans can get a maximum of 18, but we're not going to try to get 18. We won't have the points. See, we've already spent half of the 32 points, which means you would have spent well over half of the 28-point build. Because each time you spend points in here, you'll notice up to 14, we're spending 1 point apiece. But then after 14, we're spending 2 points, and after 16, we're spending 3 points for everyone. So it's got huge diminishing returns for a new player without great access to, a certain amount of ability points. So 16 is a strong number to start with, and it leaves us some, a bit of leeway to try and work around what we want to do. And Constitution, well, you are a melee fighter, or a melee barbarian, because there is a fighter class. You're a melee character. You are fighting in melee range, taking a lot of damage. You want a nice buff Constitution score to match up with what you've got here. We have 16, we have 16. That has spent for us a grand total of how much? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. So that's 20 points out of our 28 points. So normally you'll have 8 points left over. So where do we put those 8 points? Well, that, once again, that's a dependent kind of thing. Where would you like to put them? So strength is physical, raw, power, damage, and carrying capacity. And it helps a couple of the skills along the way, which we'll get into, but for the most part, those are the main hits of strength. So as a barbarian, heavy on the strength. You want to hit things, you want to hit them hard, you want to hit them fast, and you want to destroy them. And Constitution, all HP. That's the main thing. There are certain elements, like, for example, your ability to concentrate better, one of the other skills that we'll get into later. But for the most part, HP, you want to be able to take hits. So you want to hit hard, and you want to take some damage. So what are these other ones here? Dexterity, Intellect, Wisdom, and Charisma. What do they do? And basically, this is going to be a quick rundown, because Dexterity, for example, does a lot of things. But for the most part, it's defensive. You can protect yourself against magic very well. You can protect yourself against traps very well. You take less damage with hits. Good idea. So we probably want to throw in, let's throw in the first 4 points into our dexterity score. So we have 4 points remaining. Intellect, Wisdom, Charisma. So Intellect, skill points. Barbarians have access to a decent amount of skill points. Humans get an additional one for every level, and an additional 4 at the very beginning of the game. So we're not really starved for skill points. We've got a decent amount. We've only got a few skills we really need to focus on, and those are the ones we'll get into in a moment. I think we can avoid the Intellect for now, which means Wisdom and Charisma. Well, what do these do? Wisdom is defense, but it's more defense against control, crowd control, being able to be stunned or put to sleep or something like that, something that affects your mind. And it also helps with a few tracking skills, which are very decent in certain situations. We don't need a huge investment in Wisdom, to be fair, but we could put 2 points in there. Likewise, Charisma, well, that's another one where we don't need a huge investment, at least with a Barbarian. They don't really need Charisma for too much. For the most part, I think their biggest uses of Charisma are going to be Intimidate and Use Magic Device, 2 of the best skills that you can use for a melee character. And well, at least in the case of Intimidate, a very undervalued skill, but an incredibly useful skill, at least as far as elite difficulty in-game, which is what you can expect a First Life Toon to be able to accomplish. So Charisma, I'm going to put that up to 10 as well. Now, I still have 4 points left to spend, being a champion build. I've played the game, I've unlocked 32 points. You can do this yourself in-game, so it's not a huge hindrance to you. So what we can do to try and avoid influencing the game as much as possible, because we're going to be soloing, is I'm going to add those points to Charisma, because it's only going to influence Use Magic Device, which is generally a party skill, and Intimidate, which is pretty much always a party skill. So it's going to limit the amount that these extra 4 points actually do for the build, because I want to show that this build can work, not that more points will make it work. Alright, so here we are. I have 16 skill points. You will also have 16 skill points if you designed it the way that we just did there. So we have to figure out, where do we want to put them? Well, Intimidate, I guarantee you will find rewards for Intimidate. And the reason I guarantee you that is because Intimidate taunts enemies towards you. You have a huge hit point pool. Barbarians always have the largest hit point pool out of any character class. So you're going to really want to keep the enemies on you anyway and keep them away from your ranged friends. Now, this doesn't work in certain difficulty modes, but up to Elite mode, it's probably your best skill. Not to mention, you just don't want to run all over Hell's Creation trying to, punch an enemy that's running after your friend. It's a little difficult and very obnoxious. So we'll put the points there and we'll level this up as we level. Because if you put points into one of these skills, you probably want to keep it maximized so that it gets the most bang for its buck. Now you'll notice that these skills, these 4 here, do not have an asterisk beside them, but the rest of them, all the way down the list, do. And the reason for that is that these are class skills. This is what your class is best at. So you are best at Intimidating, you are best at the jump skill, listening, swim, stuff like that. And you'll notice that 2 of these skills are strength-based skills. Once again, giving us a bit of a reason to take strength. Wisdom is helpful for the listen, but we may not need it as much. We'll see what we can make here. But basically with class skills, every time you put a point in here, you see you get a point out of it. With a cross class, every time you put a point in here, you only get a half point, 0.5. And a half point basically means nothing. You need a full point before this modifier becomes something valuable. The way that Dito actually works is any integer that is not a whole number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 18, 30, stuff like that, rounds down. So 1.5 is basically 1 in Dito's calculation. So this and this are the same for all intents and purposes. But this is an actual value, 2. So you gain a skill, but it spends 2 points to gain 1 skill. So it can be a little more difficult to find what you need, and the multi-classing system can be used in an interesting way to give you more class skills so that you can get full points or maximum points out of what you need. And the reason I say that is because you can only add half of the amount of points you normally would because you've still invested 4 points in the skill. But you're not as good at it. Your class is not as good. It's a little complex to start with. A little complex and a bit overwhelming. But that's why we're walking through this. We've gone through Intimidate, that keeps enemies on you, and that's pretty good for a melee dude who can take a good hit and dish out way more damage than those, piddly, squishy rangers or wizards who are sitting in the back rows. You can hit them harder with a two-handed weapon and more often if they're on you. So what is the other skill that I wanted to give to this character? What is the other skill that you want to give to pretty much every character you create? Well, very bottom of the list. Use Magic Device. This is the best skill in the game for every class. And anyone who says otherwise, they just don't know Dito. We're gonna call a spade here and say this is the best class skill in the game. And why UMD is so good, why Use Magic Device is so good, is because you can literally use everything in the game that you otherwise would not be able, barring maybe 1 or 2 minor exceptions. But you can use all the different scrolls in the game that you would otherwise not be able to use. You can use certain armors or certain abilities on armors that you wouldn't be able to use. It's a very versatile skill, and there's a lot of different stuff you can use that will give you bonuses you would otherwise have no access to at all. So we want to maximize as much as possible in that. And you'll notice we have 4. You'll probably have 0 plus 2. I have 2 plus 2 because we had those extra charisma points. And once again, UMD is useful in some cases for soloing, but a lot of times it's more useful in a party, especially if you're trying to tackle higher end content like raids. So we've minimized our influence with my extra points, which you will get when you explore the game and do a little more and unlock certain things. So normally this would be 2, and this would be 4. Otherwise, we're pretty much caught up to what we want. Now, what else do you want? Well, as a new player, I would recommend Jump, believe it or not, because there are a lot of instances in this game where you'll want to jump, and you're a strength toon, so you'll probably have a better jump than average. So why don't we augment that with a few more points and throw it up there as one of our best skills? Because jumping, not only does it increase the height at which you jump, but it also reduces your falling damage, which when you're inexperienced and, falling off of rooftops, you kind of want to just tumble and then get back in the game, So jump is really good for that. Now, the 4th skill, this one is a really interesting one. I don't know necessarily what would be the absolute best, to be fair, and there are a lot of different options, but you can choose, and I think there's a good argument to be made for any of these choices. Listen can be a really good one because it's a class skill of yours, and you can help to find invisible enemies or hear things in dungeons, get different trigger warnings about dungeons that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get. So Listen can be useful for that. And, trying to find invisible targets without it can be really obnoxious, since Spot, which is the other way of sort of detecting invisible or hidden or stealthy enemies, is a cross-class skill. It's a little more difficult to level up. Listen might be your best bet if you want to hear enemies approaching you. And they'll basically just have little red blips that pop up at their feet that show you where they are. It's a cool ability. Balance, well, balance helps you balance, but it plays a little different in Dito than what you might expect. So balance basically allows you to get up really quickly when you're knocked down. You'll generally be knocked down by certain effects if you fail the dice roll for that particular effect. But balance will help you get back up really quickly as though it never happened. Another one that might be really interesting and really useful to you, concentration. Because concentration can be used in conjunction with your Use Magic Device that we spoke about earlier. You can use scrolls, for example. Concentration checks are used to make sure that you can concentrate on the scroll as you read it while in combat to be able to use it. It's a little more complex. I would not recommend that for a beginner player, but it can be useful later. So keep that in mind. If you find that you can't use your scrolls in combat, maybe you just need a few more concentration points. Maybe you need an item that'll help you concentrate better. There are magic items in the game all over the place, and some of them help you do that. So that's a good skill to keep in the back of your mind in case you want to use it. And finally, haggle. Haggle allows you to negotiate. You get more money. And they actually give you the details here about exactly how much haggle is worth. So approximately a 0.5% price change in your favor per each point of haggle. So each item has a base buy and sell value, right? And yours becomes 0.5% lower when you're buying and 0.5% higher when you're selling per haggle point. So it's pretty basic and understandable. So haggle's a decent skill if you need to make some money. Now, to make some starting coin, haggle is great, but you won't necessarily need it forever. So I would recommend, yeah, maybe your first tune, you can throw a couple of points into haggle, you know, see how it works. As for me, I think that just because I want to survive a little bit and, you know, just to show off the skill, I want to choose listen. I think that'll be very interesting. So we'll have a 4 listen to start off with. And once again, we have 16 points no matter what build you take, the 28-point build or the 32-point that I've unlocked. So I've spent as many skills as we're going to have. And of these, normally yours would be 4, 7, 4, and 2. But because of my extra points of charisma, I was able to get 2 extra on my charisma skills. Still, I think that's a great build to start with. I think we're going on the right track. Let's move along. Alrighty, so, Barbarians. Well, if you watch the Strimtom video, you'll have heard him mention the best thing that Barbarians have is two-handed weapons. So, we're going to go ahead and play into that a little bit. We want two-handed weapons. You'll notice that this requires Strength 15. It's right below the actual title, Two-Handed Fighting. It requires a particular number in strength. We need to actually have a certain amount of strength before we can use two-handed fighting. And if you want to make a two-handed fighter, you always have to keep that in mind. Each of these different combat style feats, we've only got access to the ones that are available to us that we've met prerequisites for. They have different things that you need, like Shield Mastery requires you to be proficient with shield use, right? General shields. And that would give you defensive benefits and a couple of offensive ones as well. Kind of interesting. But there are a bunch of different feats. This is a very complex system, and this is probably the most difficult, so I'm going to streamline it, but I'm going to show you real quick exactly how difficult it is. Boom! In epic levels, you've got all those. Those are past lives, very big system. Combat styles, these are all the different styles. Defensive fighting, now mind you, these styles, there are addendums to each of the styles, like, for example, improved two-handed fighting. Like what we've got up here, two-handed fighting, we can improve that later, but we have to have a higher strength number, we have to have a better base attack bonus. It's kind of a complex system, and it's not one we're definitely not going to get into it. All that we need to understand for this character is that our base attack bonus is equal to our level. So we're only going to be going pure Barbarian all the way through. So if we were level 12 Barbarian, we would have 12 base attack, and then we would qualify for this, and maybe some other feats like Greater, because it requires 11 base attack bonus. But let's get rid of all of these, because that's a bit of an overhaul. We're just going to go over the feats that we actually need. So we don't need Shield Mastery, because we're going to be using both hands for our two-handed weapon, right? Probably the axe on our back or something like that. So what else do we need? We've got our combat style, defensive feats, you can check through them. You don't really need to worry too much about these, though, because we built ourselves to be pretty defensive. Toughness might be the only option you'll really want out of this list, because it gives you more hit points, which gives you better chances to not die. But we'll close this for now. I think we're defensive enough as it is, just with our stats. So there are dragon marks as well. Those are a little more complicated. We're not going to bother with them, but basically they allow you to unlock certain abilities. Like, for example, Expeditious Retreat, which increases your running speed by 25% for 1 minute per character level with this least dragon mark of passage. So you can unlock these abilities, and they're racially based. So your human race has access to these 4, but say a gnome might only have access to 1 or 2 of the other ones. So we'll move right along to martial feats. Now, martial is a very good feat list for a barbarian, a very martial class, and specifically power attack. Power attack is probably the bread and butter of your early damage. So we'll want to throw that on. And with our high base attack bonus, which remember translates into a hit chance, the hit chance that you lose, the attack bonus, as power attack is mentioning here, The hit chance you lose is offset by your base attack bonus increase, so barbarians aren't going to take as big a hit from this. So yeah, you'll hit a little less frequently, but you'll smash people when you do, meaning that your hit basically ends the fight. Still, I think we've basically covered what we're doing here. We do get these extra feats, which is a seemingly bloated list, but trust me, it's not that bad. These are just all the simple weapons we're proficient in, and I'll show you what it looks like. The game will literally just tell you what it looks like when you can't use an item. So we've limited things to just your basic feats, sneak, durability, which just gives you more starting HP, dismiss charm, which is something everybody gets. We're probably not going to use it for a non-charming character, and attack, which is auto attack. So we've limited the feats to a few selections, 6 of them. See, just by knocking off certain things, like, okay, well, this means this thing and this means that thing, and these are the things that everybody gets, and these are proficiencies, it's becoming a lot more manageable just going through your feats list and seeing what's available to you. Defensive fighting would reduce your hit chance, but increase your defense, your armor class, AC. We're not going to use that. We're probably just going to use power attack. These stances, these combat stances, like offensive combat stance, or down here, defensive combat stance, you can only have one stance on at a time, and we want to hit harder, so we won't bother with that either. So basically, we get Sunder and Trip as 2 different abilities. Sunder breaks their armor and allows us to hit them with critical hits a little more often. Trip, trips them. And Barbarian Rage, which gives us a huge boost to Strength, Constitution, and a bit of a boost to will saves, which help us with those mental saving throws as well, with a little bit of reduction to armor class. So once again, we could spec at our armor class to cover that base, or we could just hit really, 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 really hard. We can dismiss that rage at any time, and we have faster movement. Barbarians can run 10% faster than normal. They get that with 1 level of Barbarian. It's a really quick investment. So now that we've covered all that, we kind of know what we've got access to. We've got better 2-handed weapons, a power attack, and these 2 attacks right here, along with our Barbarian Rage. So it limits the amount of stuff that you have to focus on, and we'll get into the game and just go through it really quick. Well, that does it for the tutorial section, at least. Holy shit, this video's running a little long. I think I'm going to cut this into 2 parts, honestly. So, what we're going to do here is, I'm going to call the video right now as it is, and we'll do the second part where I actually go through the Barbarian, playtest it, see how it works, in the next part of the video. I think that'll work out. Anyway, that's it for me. I will let you get on with your lives, and we will come back for the Barbarian Challenge, see how it works, see how what we've designed comes to fruition some other time. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great one.